In this lecture, we are going to discuss privacy impact assessments, again, PIAs, in the United States. And really by in the United States, what the IAPP body of knowledge means is in the United States federal government. Almost all of this lecture applies to the federal government, and there are likely going to be many differences across what you see here and what might be required by, for example, the California Consumer Privacy Act, or any other of the state-level statutes. So just keep that in mind moving forward. There's a brief note at the top here about PIAs in the United States. We will then discuss Privacy Threshold Analyses, or PTAs, the Privacy Act of 1974, and OMB, or Office of Management and Budget Memorandum M-03-22. In the United States, in the federal government, the E-Government Act of 2002, specifically Section 208, requires that federal government agencies conduct a privacy impact assessment when developing or procuring IT systems that contain PII, or when creating electronic collections of PII. We spoke briefly about privacy threshold analyses in the previous lecture, and there's a little asterisk up here that I want to address first. What you will see regarding PTAs will vary across organizations, and what you have on this slide is what IAPP wants you to remember. In my personal experience, a privacy threshold analysis typically does not deal much with PII because the objective of the PTA is to identify whether or not the system has any PII, and if it does have PII, in most cases, that PTA automatically becomes a PIA. But forget I just said that. What you need to know for the exam is right here. And what the IAPP wants you to remember concerning PTAs is that they include the following information. Information about the categories of data subjects, the types of PII that are collected, how that data is shared, whether or not that data is aggregated with other sources, and the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards in place to protect that PII. Again, genres, flavors of PTAs are going to vary across organizations. Also, what I've provided here concerning the Privacy Act of 1974, especially concerning rights, there's a lot more to the Privacy Act, but this is what you need to know for the exam, and so I'm not going to overwhelm you with the rest. The three primary rights that you need to remember for the Privacy Act are notice, access, and amendment. These are three rights that are fundamental to just about every privacy statute out there. In fact, I don't think I can think of one that doesn't provide notice, access, and amendment. Notice is provided via a Privacy Act statement and a system of records notice, or a SORN. We will talk about SORNs in the next slide. And access and amendment is provided via a Privacy Act request. And so an individual who wants to request their records will submit a Privacy Act request to the agency. That request will be processed, and I think probably in most cases, a request is returned. The other bit of information that you need to know about the Privacy Act of 1974 concerns SORNs, System of Records Notices. A SORN is a public-facing document that's published in the Federal Register in the interest of transparency. The Federal Register is the United States government's daily newspaper. Any type of notices, notices of proposed rulemakings, final rules, etc., these are all published in the Federal Register. Again, in the interest of transparency, to inform the public that this is what the government is doing. A SORN must include the following: purpose of collection, routine uses, storage and retrievability of information, the administrative, technical, and physical controls that are safeguarding the PII, retention and disposal policies, opportunities for consent to disclosure, and data maintenance. There's a lot more in a SORN, but these are just the top bullets that you need to remember for the exam. And a quick note concerning what a routine use is. A routine use is a condition under which a federal agency may disclose the information to others. And so if there's a program, perhaps it's a health-related program, and there are records that are contained or required by multiple agencies for processing, Perhaps the Department of Health and Human Services collects some data, they share it with the Department of Labor, etc. If that is typical, if it is a part of the system, if it is a routine use, then it will be listed in the SORN. The final little bit of U.S. federal policy that you need to know for this exam concerns Office of Management and Budget, OMB, Memorandum M-03-22. So we know what OMB stands for. The M here is for memorandum. The first two digits correspond to the year, the fiscal year that the memorandum was issued. And the last two digits here correspond to the nth memo. So this memo here, M-03-22, was published in fiscal year 2003, and it was the 22nd memo issued during that fiscal year. Also, one other quick note, OMB is an agency within the Executive Office of the President, and they are responsible for issuing a lot of privacy guidance for the federal government. Now, at the beginning of the lecture, we looked at the E-Government Act, Section 208, and so Section 208 of the eGov Act altogether is maybe 150 and 200 words. There aren't a lot of particulars there. And in order to fill in those particulars, Congress authorized OMB to issue further guidance. And OMB issued that guidance concerning the specifics of PIAs in this memorandum, in M-03-22. Again, there's a lot more to this memorandum than we have here, but this is what you need to remember for the exam. And specifically, OMB is saying that federal agencies need to conduct a PIA when, again, there's a new collection, digitization, if de-identified data is re-identified, if there are significant changes to the system, if there is use of user authentication technology or any data aggregation taking place, or if there is use of third-party services and tools. Again, this is a bit of a review with what we saw earlier, but now you know the specific guidance that provides these details. In this lecture, we went over PIAs in the United States. You need to remember that it is the E-Government Act of 2002 that requires federal agencies to conduct PIAs. They must be conducted when developing or procuring IT systems that contain PII or when creating electronic collections of PII. For the exam, you need to remember that a PTA must require categories of data subjects, types of PII, how data is shared, how data is aggregated with other sources, and the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. For the Privacy Act of 1974, you need to remember the rights of notice, access, and amendment. You also need to remember what a System of Records Notice, or SORN, is. And finally, remember that it is OMB M-03-22 that provides guidance to federal agencies concerning PIAs.